All right, so this is your kind of introduction to 2-point perspective. And the difference between that and 1 point is that in 1 point, there was one vanishing point in the center. This time we're going to have one on one side and one on the other. That allows us to build this structure here. The second part of the assignment is you choosing a theme for your city, which can be real or imaginary. You can see Aubrey here did an excellent job of Bikini Bottom because she included things to make it look like the actual cartoon, including the background and the way they do the ground, usually that purplish color. We also have a Harry Potter themed one by Brienne. So she's got different shops you'd find in Harry Potter. The flying car from the story, if you're familiar. Excellent job of perspective and of coloring. Now, if you want to do a real place, Elijah chose Italy to inspire him. So he's got like a pizza shop. He's got different buildings you might find in Italy, like real ones. And you don't necessarily have to change the shape of what we build. We can, but you don't have to. And then we have a sports themed one by Colby. It's really games, I guess, more than sports, because we've got like, an arcade, Pokemon. We've got some sports, so kind of game themed, I guess you'd call it. And he chose to do Night Sky, which turned out pretty cool. So these are just some ideas. Okay, so what we're going to end up building essentially is 5 buildings, a sidewalk, and the road here. So to start with, you have to find on your horizontal paper, which you should already have name, date, and period on, you have to find the midpoint. This time the horizon line is going to show a little bit. You can see in Colby's here that on the sides you can see the horizon line where the sky and the ground meet. That's important. So we're going to measure on our paper. Mine's 9 inches. I make a mark at 4.5. And then I do the same thing on the other side, 4.5. When I line my ruler up with those 2 marks, I will have a nice even horizon line. You will be erasing some of it, so you probably don't want to go as dark as I did. Now this tick mark in the middle is to help us build the structure to make the buildings. So I just found the midpoint. My paper is 12 inches long, so I made a tick mark at 6. Okay. What we're going to do is build what I call a kite or diamond shape, and it's going to be similar to the floating line I mentioned in 1 point perspective because it will not touch the top or bottom. Okay, so for instance, if you're really into measuring and you have a 9 by 12 paper like I do, you could measure 3 inches from the horizon line and 3 inches from the horizon line, like that. Usually I just kind of eyeball it. You want the one down at the bottom to be a little bit shorter than the one at the top. That way we have room. I'm actually going to erase some for the sidewalk and the road. Next step is going to be to go ahead and label your vanishing points. So at the very edges of your paper, you're going to have a dot and a dot. Just like 1 point, we got to use our dots. Okay. So let me zoom in. We're going to put an L above this one, left, R above this one for right. Of course, eventually they'll be gone, but you need to keep them for a while. Step 1 is to take your ruler, line it up with one of your vanishing points. I'm using L, and the top of that vertical line you just drew. So I'm making sure they're lined up and making sure I'm holding my ruler down, and I'll connect them like that. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So my ruler is going to touch the top of that vertical line and the R vanishing point. Connect. Okay, you'll do the same thing on the bottom. Go to the vanishing point. Make sure you are on this line here and connect. And lastly, one more left. Hold your ruler secure and connect. So what we've done basically is made what the buildings are going to fit into. Now we start with the middle building, and the easiest way to make the middle building, a lot of people like them the same on both sides, it doesn't really matter. But the easiest way to do the middle building is to take your ruler, line it up right against your vertical line. Make sure you're holding it down, and inside that kite shape, draw a line on one side, and then go to that middle line again, and do the same thing on the other side. Rulers are usually 1 inch wide, which means now it's the same on both sides. As we go, if you have access to an eraser, it is a little bit easier to erase what you don't need. So inside this middle building only, which means in between these lines here, we can erase the horizon line for right now. It just makes it less confusing to not have a bunch of lines. Now, we're going to actually this time start at the ends, because what we're going to do is define where the horizon line is going to end. So on your paper, you could do from, remember we use knuckle to end of thumb, about that far from the edge of the paper. Make sure your ruler is vertical and make a little line like that. Okay, now there is part of that we're going to erase because we have to keep some of it. We got to keep the horizon line, and this down here is actually going to be part of the sidewalk. So what we're erasing is this top part of the kite here. So I'm going to start at my vanishing point and erase until I get to my vertical line right here. There we go. So I still have this horizontal line and this bottom one. All I did was get rid of between the vanishing point and the vertical line I drew. And I'll repeat the process on the other side. I'm going to kind of measure, line up, make sure it's vertical, draw my line inside that kite shape, and then erase that top line from the vanishing point to the vertical line I just drew. There we go. All right, so now we've defined where our buildings are going to go. The next step is to build the next two buildings. So these buildings will have, as you can see on the sides, regular buildings. And then we have one on each side of the middle that has a side to it. So this part's a little bit different. First, I'm going to go to my vertical line I just drew. And I can line up here. If I want a thicker building, I can move my ruler over a little bit, make a vertical line inside the kite, like this. And then between these two vertical lines here, I can erase the horizon line. It's very important that you do not erase it outside the buildings. Otherwise, your buildings are kind of floating, which is a little weird, I guess, unless you have a cloud city. Now the next building, I'm going to make another vertical line. And again, it doesn't matter if they're the same size. You do want a little bit of space between here and here, so don't make it shorter than an inch, okay? So I'm going to draw my second line. That is vertical. Okay. And then between these two lines now, I'm going to erase the the horizon line. There we go. Now what we have here is where the side of this building is going to go. So we can go ahead and erase the horizon line right here. And between the middle building and this one here, we're going to erase the top line. So if it helps you, you can count 1, 2, 3 from the vanishing point. And when you get to that third vertical line, you're going to erase that top part of the kite between it and the middle building right there. So now you've got two buildings, space, middle building. We're going to repeat the process on the other side, and again, it doesn't matter if they're the same width. It doesn't matter if they're as wide as each other. So I'm going to draw another vertical line in my kite. Okay, I'm going to erase my horizon line just inside there, making sure I leave it by the vanishing point. And then I'll move over and do another vertical line inside that shape. Okay, like this. So in between these two lines, I can erase the horizon line now. And then in between these two, what that leaves you with is a horizon line over here and over here. Now again, if it helps you, count. So we've got vertical line 1, vertical line 2, vertical line 3. So this is the top part we're erasing after vertical line 3 until the middle building. So again, we've got 2 buildings, space, middle building. This is where we're going to start to label left and right, and it's important you leave these even if you think you know what you're doing, because it's so easy to get confused. So I'm going to start at this building over here on the left and put an L above it. Okay, and then this one's also on the left, so I'm going to put an L above it as well. Now where I have this blank space, that is a little different. I have to put an R, because when we use 2-point perspective, we are going to be using 2 different vanishing points, which means we're going to have to use, in this case, the right-hand vanishing point. And then on the middle building, because this is your middle line here, another L. So on the left side, it goes L, L, R, L. As you configure, it's the opposite on the other side. So you've got R, L above the blank spot, then R, R. These help you remember which vanishing point to use when. We're going to start by doing the sides of these 2 buildings, and it is helpful to go to where this blank space is and identify the line you're going to be using, which is this one right here. You got blank space between the middle building and this one. If you circle, okay, the corner up here, follow it straight down and circle that one. It'll be a little easier for you to identify what to match up with the right-hand vanishing point. So, because it says R, I must use R. I'm going to line my ruler up with the right vanishing point, because it says R, and that top part I circled. And my line is going to go from there and stop at the next vertical line, the middle building. And I'll follow straight down to right here where I circled. And again, I have to line up with the vanishing point. Now this one's even harder with checking your ruler than 1 point, because if you try and go like this and then like this, it's going to move. So every time you do one of these, double check it. Okay, I'm going to go from that circle to the middle building. So now I have building 1 and 2, side of building 2, middle building. So do the side of this one, start at that top corner, circle, follow it straight down to do your second circle so you can identify what you're using. And because it says L left, I'm going to have to use the L left vanishing point. So my ruler is lined up with what I circled, that corner and L, and I'm going to connect it to the middle building, follow straight down, and again match up with L. I'm very careful I'm matching up, and the bottom of that line, and go in towards the middle building. Okay, so now you have 5 buildings. 1, 2 in the side of it, 3 is the middle building, 4 in the side of that one, and 5. Okay, so to begin with, we'll do the sidewalk, and then we'll start talking about windows and doors. To add the sidewalk, you can you're going to start on your middle line, your vertical line, and just add a little bit to it. I'm just going to add only 1 inch because it looks like I didn't leave much room back down here. Okay, so this is going to connect to the vanishing points exactly the same way we did in the very beginning, which means I'm going to have my ruler right here, the bottom of that line, and on the vanishing point, and connect them. Just like that. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. It'll be on their vanishing point and the bottom of that line and connect them. Okay, that's the top of the sidewalk. we want to add the curb, okay? And for that, we're just going to add a tiny little bit down there to what we already have. And we're going to repeat that process where we line up their vanishing point and that line. Now, sometimes it'll get so skinny it'll kind of disappear. That's normal, so don't worry about that. I'll do the same thing on the other side. There we go. Okay, there's my sidewalk. Now to make the cracks in the sidewalk, you'll notice the sidewalk cracks are horizontal and they get closer together the closer they get to the vanishing points, okay? Because they're getting further away. So what I usually do is I make my ruler horizontal and I'll start right at the bottom of that middle building and go straight across on the sidewalk like that. Now the next one I do, just like that checkerboard floor we did for one point, will be a little bit skinnier, as in a little bit closer together. And then I'll do another set closer together. Now if you do too many of these, you'll end up with some so tiny you can't even see them. So don't feel the need to do a ton. If they do get so tiny you cannot see them, then just go with it. That's not that big of a deal. Looks like mine aren't going to be exactly even, which again is okay. Because what happened was it gets skinnier on this side than this side on the sidewalk, and so that means I'm going to have a little bit fewer. So when I get to this point and they're so small, I'm just going to do it one side at a time until they get so tiny they disappear. And there we go. These already disappear. Okay, the trick to make this look very realistic is right here. Okay, this is the curb of the sidewalk. We're going to do a vertical line like that from connecting the horizontal to the end of the sidewalk. Do those on all the ones that you can really see. If they are so tiny you can't see them, then don't worry about it. Okay, now to do road lines, like the yellow lines, we need to, again, line up their vanishing point. I'm going to pick the lefts first. And this time I'm going to arrange the ruler at an angle. I'm going to draw a line, goes all the way off the page. But a yellow line in the road is usually not just one line. So I have to make a second one. Okay, so I'm going to move over a little bit from that first one and repeat that process. So you can see it's going into the distance and getting smaller. Now I'll do the same thing on the other side. Move it over, double check it, and there we go. If you want dotted yellow lines, you would be making rectangles. So for instance, I would do horizontal lines and then move it a little bit more, do another set of horizontal lines, and simply erase in between like that. So that would give me those little dotted lines you see in the real roads. And of course, just like the sidewalk, they get smaller and smaller as they go back. So if you choose to do these, just make sure every time you do a new set, they're a little smaller so that it looks realistic. And again, my lines are so small that I'm going to start doing one side at a time just for ease. But if you really want things exactly even, you would have to line your ruler up on both sides at the same time. Now mine are getting so small, I might have to stop in a minute. That's going to be my last set because it gets so small, can't see them anymore. So on this side, same process. They get smaller and smaller as they go backwards. If you choose to make it a straight yellow line without these dotted lines, then you would just skip this part right here. Okay, so that's kind of our setup for the city. Now, what you're going to be required to do is at least one thing that uses vanishing points correctly on each building surface, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, obviously, a real city, you're not going to have just like a door with no sign. But to begin with, we'll go over doors, windows, and signs. And then you're going to add more to make yours look a little more realistic. So I'm going to start on this building over here, and I'm going to start with a door. And it's very similar to what we did with 1 point perspective. Now I'm going to go a little bit below the horizon line because it's a small building, so the door would be pretty short. I'm going to make sure I'm on my L vanishing point because it says L, and I'm going to do a little floating line. And when I mean little, it's pretty little. And then I can go straight down to the sidewalk. And there's my door. Okay. Now if I want to do a sign, a store sign, this one says L, must use L. Line up again, hold my ruler down, and I'll start with another floating line, but you need to make it big enough that you can write inside of it. So even though it doesn't touch the edges, it's pretty darn close. Then I'll move down a little bit, make sure I'm still on the L vanishing point to make my bottom line. And this is very similar to the way we did windows and 1 point perspective. Because now we're simply going to connect like that. And that could be a store sign. Now if you wanted to do a window, let's go to the right side this time. Okay, we'll do a window on this one. So it says R, which means we use R. This window is going to be at the top of the store. So I'm going to do my floating line. There's my floating line. I'll move down a little bit and I'll make sure I'm on the R again and do my second floating line, which is, as you'll notice, just like the store sign, except usually the windows are a little bit smaller. And just like with 1 point perspective, if I want window panes there, I have to line up with my R again to make sure my window pane matches my vanishing point. And then I can do my vertical line. Okay. Now the sides, again, you got to pay attention to the vanishing point because usually if it's on the left side it's left, right side is right, except for those two spots. So let's say I want to do a row of bricks on the side of this building here. Well, even though it's on the left side, it says R. So that means I have to use the R. So I'll start by lining my ruler up with the R vanishing point, and I'll start making rows. Every time I do this, I have to make sure my ruler's on the vanishing point because it will move, which means it will get off center and it will mess up your rows. So you need to double check every single time because as I'm going down, my ruler is in fact moving off the vanishing point. last one. Now bricks, just so you know, they're just like the ones in our room here, where they're not like a checkerboard where you go straight down. They're every other one. So I've got 2 lines here, and then in the second row I do a vertical line in the middle of each of those bricks. So as I go down, I'll keep making sure they're in the middle of the brick before it. So it's basically going to go 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, and so on. There's 3. Now I would recommend using my ruler for this, but I'm trying to get through this video quickly. The reason I'm not going to do every single little thing is because I don't want you copying this exactly. That means you won't have learned much. Okay? So there's my bricks on the side. If I did want to match them on this side, if I want a full brick store, and this is my sign, I'd probably add my door first because it's just easier. So since it says L, I would use L, do my floating line, and then go straight down. Like that. There's my door. Okay, now when I want these bricks to match up, this one says L, so I'm using L. And I'm going to try and line up with my vanishing point and the line I made on the other side. That way, they look like they match. So again, every time that I move my ruler, I have to double check it because it is moving on me every time I do it. In fact, I'm going to have to hold it a little bit better. The only time you will ever have a line that is completely horizontal is if it is on the horizon line itself, which when you erase, you'll probably still be able to see it. I can see, I don't know if you can see it on mine, but I can see it on mine. And that would be the only time you have a completely horizontal line. Okay. Now I can do, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, which means this row will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth all the way down. All right, now in the middle building, you just pay attention. L means L, R means R. If you have something you want to do like stairs, for instance, then that is something I do have a PowerPoint on, a slideshow that I will attach when we start this project so that you'll be able to flip through it and find it. If that's not going to help you, I will. Okay, the reason I don't include it in this is because it's just so much information people get confused. So for instance, let me see if I can find one that's got, okay, so Brianne did awnings, which means she would have lined up with her vanishing point and drawn a short floating line, and then matched up with her vanishing point and done a slightly longer floating line, and then connected them at an angle like that. Okay? So even if you're doing something rounded, like the top of this window here, you still have to use your vanishing point to make sure you know where the end of it is. All right? So those are some examples. That's how you get started. And then you begin adding on according to your theme. So let's say it's Paris, you would need all the signs to be in French. If it's Foley, you would put things that you would find in Foley. And I don't mean Walmart, I mean like Stacy's or Yaba's or Jan's Art Studio, things like that. If it's Harry Potter, you put things from Harry Potter. If it's Unicorn Land, everything's unicorn themed, whatever it is you choose, okay? So this is the basic setup. You will need at least one thing that uses vanishing points correctly. And these places I'm circling. Okay, so you can see those circled letters. Now, again, it'll look weird if you only put one thing on each building. That's just the minimum. I would recommend making it look like a real store, okay? Like these do, where we have signs, windows, awnings, things like that you would normally have in that kind of setting. Again, here we've got bricks, even the Legos up here are done well. The doors have kind of a border on them. You can do signs like this that go all the way across, just so you know. And even these up here, like the Pokemon balls, he would have to use the ruler to know how high they go. So make sure you are using your vanishing points. That means do not erase the vanishing points or these letters until I've checked it. Okay? That is your basic 2-point perspective.